As you can tell, water is the theme. And as I thought about what can I say that adds to what we've done already today, and a song came up. As you know, songs are real important to me. Music is part of the water of my life. And a couple of years ago, I was working on the farm, and this particular song caught my attention. And I hadn't listened to it in a long time. And as I was working on this service, the backpacks and blessing our children and the water, the gathering of water and the ceremony of water, this song came to mind. But I thought I'd first tell you why and how that connects with spirituality. You know, the theme of water has been constant in my life this past year. I moved to a place where the Tomibamba River runs right in front of my house. I can open the windows and hear it. I can go upstairs and look out and see it. I take my shoes off sometimes and walk over to the park and walk alongside the river. It flows quickly. And it chills you if you put your toes in it. Ask me how I know. But this water comes from up in the Cajas Mountains. If you drive up in the mountains, you see lakes in between the valley of these mountains that are 8,000 plus. The Cajas Mountains go 10 to 14,000 feet. Think as high as Machu Picchu, way up in the heavens. And this water comes down this river and it flows past my house. It goes down to the Amazon River and connects. And then that river flows all the way out into the Atlantic Ocean. The water that comes right in front of my house. And in many of the spiritual traditions, water is a symbol of spirituality. In the Chinese traditions, wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, but it all comes back to water. In Christianity, water is a symbol of compassion and grace and forgiveness. They put you in the water and bring you back up out of the water as a symbol of holiness, but also grace, the washing away of sins. But water isn't just a Christian spiritual symbol. The Buddhists have a water offering. They practice this practice. They say it should be the freshest and the purest water, and they collect this water, and they make these offerings in 7 bowls. They realize it's water to drink, but also water to wash feet with. Water that the flowers are placed upon. Water to bless the incense, the lamps, the perfumes, and the foods. It's the drinking and the washing that's the purification. But water isn't just a Buddhist symbol for spirituality. In the Islamic world, water is the origin of life, created by God. It serves to purify the human being, both on the outside and on the inside. Water is on the yin side of the yin-yang. It's silent, it's receptive, it's non-reactive, it's soft, it's flexible. It's able to be receptive to opposing things. It symbolizes, though, being receptive to opposing ideas, being willing to change your views sometimes, being willing to maintain a certain flexibility, because never changing our viewpoint on anything or never changing your approach is like never being willing to bend with the winds of life. Without water, we become rigid like a dead branch. Water is resilient to change. It's able to take on any different form. Water survives many circumstances by adaptation. The softness of water adds strength to living beings because it makes us flexible and therefore more resilient to outside circumstances. But water is not just a Buddhist spiritual symbol. The Taoist said, "The living and soft are yielding. The dead are rigid and stiff. Living plants are flexible and tender. The dead are brittle and dry." In chapter 16 of the Tao Te Ching, it expands that idea in full, and it says, "When first born, we are small and weak. The living are soft and flexible. When we die, we become hard and stiff. The dead are rigid, unmoving. The greenery, grasses, plants, and trees growing are tender and supple. Dead are dry and brittle. And so the strong and hard go along with dying. The open to change and flexible goes along with living. When an army becomes inflexible, it suffers defeat. A tree that won't bend easily breaks in storms. The hard and the strong will fail, but the open-hearted will prevail. Water, the spiritual symbol, because water is what clears away everything on us that doesn't belong. I was out in the middle of the wilderness, literally. There was mud on my feet. There was mud on my body in places that I did not appreciate. It had rained the night before, but let me back up and paint a picture of where I was. I took a bus, 2.5 hours, to a place called Na Run Hall. There were no orange trees there. I rendezvoused with a group of people. We drove an hour. We drove so far that Google Maps does not show roads to where we were. We drove over roads that literally drove into the water of the rivers that flowed, not once, but several times. I said, "The road ends," and they say, "No, it doesn't." I said, "How do we get to the other side of the river?" They say, "We just keep driving." We drove down the dirt road, through the river several times, and out on the other side. We drove into what I was told were cacao groves or orchards. I don't really know what they're called, but said to be the original varieties of cacao that originate in Ecuador. And as we drove up into the wilderness of this forest to meet a shaman, we arrived to the home of a man. Now we had to park on this dirt road, and we walked in. Our backs packed, the backpack on my back, my bag on my shoulder. And as we walked in, the mud, the ground was like sponge as I walked onto it. And we participated in this spiritual ceremony. But the next morning, the sun came up and the mud was all around me, on me. And do you know what solved that dilemma? It was the river. I walked down to the river. I took off my shoes and I looked down at the stones that were orange and gray and black, just like these stones in the bowl right now. There were flakes of gold shimmering from the sands of this river. And it was chilly. The water was cold. But it was the kind of cold that refreshes you. And I went and I sat in the river. And I let the water flow over me. You see, the water cleaned the outside. It washed off the mud. It washed it off of the surface, but water in the spiritual context does that very same thing to our insides. Water is supposed to symbolically help us remove all that is impure within us, all that is not true, all that is not loving. You see, one drop of water is soft. Drop, drop, drop. But when the collective force of those drops come together, it's powerful. It washed over me, the flow of this river coming and passing me. It had enough force to catch me off balance when I wasn't paying attention, or when I stepped on one of those slippery rocks. But it was able to wash me completely clean. Spiritual water works the same way. But we have these spiritual symbols. What for? Why do we have these spiritual symbols? And then this song came to mind. Tom Misch. He's on my radio station. I've got a radio station called My Frequency. They're my jams. They're the music that makes my soul sing, but often there's a message that's been very personal to me, and this is one of those songs, and I thought about it when I thought about water. Because what difference does it make? Why do we practice these things and light the candles and say these words that sound kind of spiritual, you know? And if you say them softly, I think they sound even more spiritual. But why? You see, Tom Misch is a guitarist. He plays my kind of music. And he wrote this song that probably should be called A River Run Throughs It, but it's called It Runs Through Me. And I thought about water. What flows through me that purifies me? Because why? So that I can be true to me.